Hi folks, and welcome to the Is It Worth It for the M56 Scorpion, the Tier 7 American Premium Tank Destroyer. Now, this tank destroyer is not currently available from the tech tree or from the gift shop, but it was available from the gift shop a few days ago, at least here on the EU server, and I'm sorry I didn't get the review done in time for that, but I have absolutely no doubts it's going to be available again in the future. The question we're going to be asking today is this tank worth it? So as per usual, let's start with the history. In the M56 Scorpion, or the SPAT, the SPAT, yes, SPAT stands for Self-Propelled Anti-Tank. It was basically an SPG, or self-propelled gun slash TD tank destroyer hybrid, designed for easy air transport by either drop shoot or by helicopter. It was basically used for rapid response, and it provided added firepower for paratroopers behind enemy lines, for example. It was designed by General Motors Cadillac between 1950 and 1953 and was produced from 1953 until 1959, and there were 325 of them built in total. Built from aluminium, or aluminum if you happen to speak American English. It basically had no armor, but it was built from aluminium to keep the weight down and as a result be easy transportable by air. But it did have a 90mm gun. Now, this 90mm gun was the same gun that came on the M46 patent, or M47 patent at the time. But the M47 weighed nearly 45 tons, whereas the Scorpion fully loaded weighed less than 8, so it was much lighter than the patent, but was able to provide the same sort of firepower. It was used during combat during the Korean War, and it was exported to Spain, Morocco, and Korea. That's South Korea, not North. But it wasn't very much liked by its crews. It didn't have a great reputation. The crews didn't enjoy this tank very much, and perhaps from this wonderful modeling by Wargaming you can actually see why. You see, it offered absolutely no crew protection. You can see that the seats here, the driver sat towards the left of the machine. The gun shield was cut out to give the driver vision. The loader basically sat right out here on the open. The commander sat in here with his little radio. Great modeling. And the gunner, again, sat in the tank, but it's completely open top, completely exposed. No protection from the crew from enemy fire from the sides or from the rear. And it's completely exposed to the elements. So the crew suffered from rain and heat, and yeah, they didn't like it very much. Now, the gun shield on the front of the tank, basically, even though it's a gun shield, it was very poor, and it only provided protection from the front, and even then the protection it offered wasn't very good. The loader, who sat here, very exposed, actually had to stand on a fold-out platform. This platform here, I don't know, it doesn't look like a platform, but it basically folded out from the back of the tank in order for the loader to load the gun, and as a result, again, the loader was very exposed when he was loading the Scorpion, the M56 Scorpion. Forgot the name of the tank there for a moment. But the crews did not like this tank very much, regardless of whether or not it was able to perform. So not only did the crew not like the tank, but because it only weighed 8 tons or less than 8 tons, the chassis or the frame of the tank was built out of aluminium, the kickback after firing this 90mm gun would throw the front of the tank into the air, and the rear of the tank would be pushed into the ground. It was forced into the ground, and as a result, because the superstructure was so weak and light, the superstructure could damage itself by simply just firing its gun. The other downside to the tank's reaction to firing was that the debris that was thrown up by the muzzle blast gave away the tank's position, and it could easily be spotted. So not only did it give away its position when it fired its gun, not only was the reaction to the hull violent with the front of the tank thrown into the air and the rear of the tank propelled into the ground, but it could damage itself as well. So towards the end of the Vietnam War, the Scorpion was phased out in favor of the Sheridan light tank, which had a 152mm gun, and after the war it was officially retired. But regardless of the problems, the fact that the tank damaged itself when it fired its gun, the fact that the tank gave away its position when it fired its gun, the fact that the crews hated it because there was no protection from enemy fire or no protection from the elements, you've got to admit that the tank actually did do its job, because this 90mm provided incredibly good fire support, similar to the M47 patents of the time, but on a tank that just weighed 8 tons, so it could be deployed very quickly, could be deployed very easily, and in that regard it was a success. So let's do a quick side-by-side comparison between the M56 Scorpion and all the other Tier 7 premium tank destroyers in the game. Now, I remember playing World of Tanks at a time when there was only one, the SU-122-44, but now there are 6, so it's up against the E-25, the SU-122-44, the 122S for the Russians, the AT-15A for the British, and the T-28 concept also for the Americans. And this whole layout has completely changed since the last time I did a review, thanks to the latest patch, but we're just going to fly down through this. The shell damage for the tank, what are we expecting? Well, it's pretty average. I mean, it's not the worst shell damage, it's not the best shell damage, it fits right in the middle, so yeah, okay, alpha damage looks okay. Penetration is very, very good. Look at this penetration. The minimal penetration you get at 100 meters is 164, and that is better than anything else up here by a significant margin. And the top penetration you get is 274, and again, that's better than anything up here by a significant margin, so the penetration is very, very good. Of course, we'll take a closer look at these when we look at the gun. The rate of fire seems to be average. It's not the best, it's not the worst. So we've got an average rate of fire, very good penetration, average alpha damage. Obviously, because the rate of fire is average, the gun's reload is average. It's not the best, it's not the worst, but it's quite good. It's actually looking okay. The first real negative for the M56 Scorpion is when we come to gun traverse speed, which is only just 12.5 degrees per second. That is the worst gun traverse of any of the tanks up here. Now, while the tank is very, very good with regarding gun depression, another positive for the tank, it's got 10 degrees of gun depression compared to any of the other tanks up here. Only the AT-15A matches it. Very good gun depression. It's also got very, very good gun traverse arc of 29 degrees. Again, much better, or well, almost as good as anything up here. Better than most of the tanks up here, and in fact only the T-28 concept matches it for a gun traverse limit. So that is a tank known for its gun traverse. That just shows you how good the gun arc is on this tank. It's gun depression, it's got gun arc, but that gun traverse speed is a big, big negative. Far slower than any of the other tanks up here. So here we are in Muravanka. First of all, you're going to see a little bit of friendly damage due to the fact that this tank weighs absolutely nothing, and teammates can sometimes be more dangerous. It was my own fault. I turned into the Patton KR. So yeah, this tank, it's so easy to team damage, either by your own careless driving or the careless driving of your teammates, but more about that. In a moment, we're talking about the gun traverse, because with only 12 degrees per second gun traverse, it means Chaffee directly ahead, and I can't track him. I can't track him. The gun traverse just could not keep up with the speed of the Chaffee. So yeah, this is definitely a negative for the tank when you're dealing with fast-moving targets. When we come to aiming time, we've got very, very good aim time of 1.8 seconds. Now, that is for a tank destroyer. It's not quite as good as the E-25. It matches the AT-15A, but it is better than the other tanks up here. So the aim time looks to be quite good. The gun dispersion also looks to be quite good. Again, it's not the best, it's not the worst. It seems to be pretty average when you consider the E-25 and the AT-15A get much, much better gun traverse, or gun dispersion. But when you take a look at 0.32 and the fact that the next highest gun dispersion is 0.38, it's actually very, very, very good. So good aim time, good accuracy, and then we come to another negative for the Scorpion. The final stat for the gun is its DPM, because while the alpha damage looks average, the rate of fire looks average, unfortunately, because of the lack of alpha damage and rate of fire, yeah, the DPM much, much worse on the Scorpion than any of the other tanks up here. In fact, only the T-28 concept comes close. That's not a tank known for its DPM, and it's still got better DPM than the Scorpion. So yeah, the gun looks very, very good with regards most of its stats. The only negatives for the gun seem to be its gun traverse and its DPM, but you know, just bear in mind this is a tier 7, and when you've got 2100 DPM at tier 7 that can be buffed with crew skills and equipment, you know, it's workable. It's not terrible, but it's definitely the worst of any of the premium TDs up here. And then another negative for the tank, which is its hit points. Now this is a tank that has absolutely no armor. Look at this. Another negative for the tank, absolutely no armor. It gets 1 millimeter of hull armor. That's why I'm not even going into Tank Viewer or Tanks GG to show you the armor profile of this tank, because it doesn't have any armor. Of course, the tracks do count as spaced armor, and you know, I think it's about 15 millimeters of spaced armor if you hit the tracks, but 15 millimeters is still nothing. And on top of that, the gun can act as a shot magnet, so sometimes, you know, you will get shot. Occasionally you might bounce if they hit your tracks or gun, but don't count on it. It's very unlikely to happen. So for a tank that has absolutely no armor, and yeah, it gets the worst hit points of any of the TDs up here, so less chance of bouncing a shot than any of the other tanks, and it gets less hit points. Two negatives. The weight of the tank is also, well, it could be a positive or a negative. You could see here that it is easily, by a huge margin, thanks to the tank in real life, a very, very light tank. It comes in at about 7.5 tons for me, fully loaded, fully equipped with the equipment, and that is significantly lighter than any of the other tanks up here. Now, that is a bonus because it means that the engine has less work to do in order to push the tank, but it's a negative because it means that, unfortunately, you're going to suffer from ram damage a lot in this tank. Now, it's not just enemy tanks that can ram you to death, it's friendlies as well. So here we are in Ensk, and I've already taken some team damage just driving out of cap. And a little bit more team damage there. And while I'm defending cap, a little bit more team damage. And more team damage. In fact, throughout this entire game, that's the only damage I received, and it was all done from friendly tanks ramming this incredibly light, poorly armored tank. However, because of that low weight, and because of the fact the tank has no armor resulting in the low weight, the fact it also has a negative of 200 horsepower engine compared to any of the engines up here, it's the worst engine, it really doesn't matter, because even though it gets a very, very poor engine compared to any of the other tanks up here, its power to weight limit is incredibly good. In fact, it's got the best power to weight ratio of any of the tanks up here of 26.69. That's better horsepower to weight ratio over the E25. It's got very, very good horsepower to weight ratio. When we come down to speed, again, speed seems to be average on paper. 45 kilometers an hour top speed, 17 in reverse. Now, this was buffed in a recent patch. This used to be much, much worse, but the tank has actually become much better. The reverse speed was buffed. 45 kilometers an hour seems to be quite poor because, you know, the E25, even the SU-122-44 and the ISU-122S are, you know, almost as quick. It only beats the two slow, heavily armored TDs at the end. However, because of that horsepower to weight ratio, it can reach 45 kilometers an hour very, very easily. It can reach its top speed far better than the SU-122-44 can, and definitely much, much better than the ISU-122S can. So, yeah, the top speed can be reached very, very easily, regardless of what type of ground you're driving on. And then another positive for the tank, its traverse speed is very, very good. Now, on paper, its traverse speed is not quite as good as the E25 or the SU-122, but it is better than the other three tanks. So it's fast, it's mobile, accelerates well, and its traverse speed is very, very good. Another positive for the tank, and this is a huge, huge positive you can't overlook when you're talking about the Scorpion, is its concealment factor, its camo values, because this is a tank destroyer that was introduced after the camo nerfs for tank destroyers in World of Tanks. Now, some of the tanks here were introduced before the camo nerfs. The AT-15A wasn't nerfed because it was introduced before the camo nerfs. However, because it's a premium tank, it wasn't changed, and as a result, the camo values stay the same. But Even though the camo values haven't been nerfed, the camo values are still very, very poor on a tank like the AT-15A. The E25 was introduced before the camo nerfs, and because it's a premium tank, the camo values weren't nerfed. And you could see that this tank, which is a new tank introduced since the nerfs, has a camo value that's almost as good as the E25. So this is a premium tank that was introduced after the nerfs that really hasn't been affected by the nerfs, unlike some of the other tanks up here. And even compared to all the tanks up here, the camo values are incredibly good. Only the E25 is slightly better, and not by much. So the stealth value, the camo value of this tank is extremely good. Can't be underestimated. Even the camo value while moving, look at that, 27.6. Very, very good. Only the E25 has it slightly beaten, and not by much, but much, much better than any of the other tanks. So a lot of that's down to the fact that this is one of the smallest tanks in the game. The M56 Scorpion is incredibly small. In fact, I haven't compared them side by side, but I think maybe it's as small as the E25, maybe even smaller. I might do that before the review is ended. So camo values are a big, big bonus for this tank. When we come to view range, we've got a negative, unfortunately, because it's got, well, I mean, 350 is... It is terrible. You know, for a tank destroyer, a tier 7 that can see tier 9's 350 meters of view range is terrible. Only the SU-122-44 has worse view range. All the other tanks have much, much better view range. Even the ISU-122S has better view range than the M56 Scorpion. So you're definitely going to have to put optics of some sort on this tank, and you're going to be relying on teammates maybe to do a little bit of spotting for you. But on the other hand, because of that very, very good camo value, you might actually get more joy. You know, you can spot your own targets because it's harder for them to spot you. You will spot them even with bad camo view or bad view range. You will spot them before they spot you because of those camo values. So I think maybe the view range was very, very poor on this tank because of the exceptionally good camo values, but that's just speculation. The signal range is also very, very poor compared to the other tanks. In fact, only the ISU-122S has got worse signal range, but you know, when you get to higher tiers, signal range is really only a factor at lower tiers. When you get to the higher tiers, you're going to be playing alongside tanks with very, very good signal range, so it's not going to be as big a factor, but it does have the worst signal range of any of the tanks up here, with the one exception. So overall, from the stats, the mobility of the tank is very, very good. Even though it gets the worst engine power, the horsepower to weight ratio is very, very good. It is fast, it is mobile, and it has a traverse speed of 42 degrees per second. So it's quite a maneuverable tank, and the reverse speed isn't too bad since its recent buff. The camo rating is extremely good, and it's even better when you consider the fact it's got almost 30 degrees of gun traverse arc, which means you don't need to move the hull to keep the gun on target, which just adds to its camo value. The survivability of the tank is not great. It gets poor hit points for its tier compared to the other premium tanks, and it's got absolutely no armor. The view range is poor, signal range is poor, but the gun has so many positives. It's got 10 degrees of gun depression, a really, really good gun arc, like I've mentioned, decent aim time, decent accuracy, incredibly good penetration, the alpha damage is okay, the rate of fire is okay, and the DPM is actually okay, even though it's got the worst DPM of any of the tanks up here. Considering it's just a tier 7, 2.1k DPM is still very, very good for a tier 7. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the stats. Okay folks, let's check out this gun and this engine in action. We are here on El Halouf, and look at this speed. I am already at 45 kilometers an hour. We are 2 seconds into this game, and I am already at full speed. The acceleration of the Scorpion is absolutely amazing, and we're maintaining that 45 kilometers an hour along here. Now, you'll also notice I'm a tank destroyer, but I'm a tank destroyer that's fast, that's mobile, and has decent gun depression. So I'm not sitting back, I'm not sitting where our Hellcat is or our ISU-152 is. Just because you're a tank destroyer, have absolutely no armor, poor hit points, doesn't mean you need to play this thing passively. I think you get very good results if you play it passively, but if the map allows you the circumstances to play aggressively, you do. And I have absolutely no idea how that shot didn't pen the Cromwell, but There we go. Some friendly team damage where the AMX 5100 tried to avoid him. This tank, it just takes so much team damage. Either through careless driving or careless driving by others. But anyway, we're moving into position, and as I say, I have no idea how I bounced. Oh, it was a comet. No idea how I bounced on that comet, but look at this. We're moving up into position. I've got gun traverse, I've got gun depression. We put a shot into the ELC, and we're just staying safe. There is RT in this game, and you know, if I'm in a Scorpion, I expect RT to be aiming for me, so as a result, I'm trying to stay as RT safe as I can. ELC wants me to poke the corner. I've got gun depression, I've got gun arc, and look at this. Okay, they're crossing, 269, easy shot in the side of a Tiger. Can we get any more shots in? Nope, not at the moment. But I'm keeping an eye on the minimap, I need to be careful. Oh, hello. And I failed to track the KV-13. I go for the track shot, failed to pen him, or failed to track him, but I get a shot in. Now look at what's about to happen here. Look at what's about to happen. The KV-13 didn't shoot the IS-6, the KV-13 waited for me. He waited for me. We got another shot in, but we trade some damage with the KV-13. Because tanks just love shooting the Scorpion. They love shooting the Scorpion. They'll hold their shots in order to get a shot at you. But in the meantime, I thought this Panther 2 had been, or Jagd Panther 2 had disconnected, but apparently, nope, he's still around. So we've put 2 shots in, and it looks like he's advancing. And, you know, again, if I'd been a little bit wiser, I probably should have tried to track him in hindsight. At the time, I didn't think about that, but I should have tracked the Jagd Panther 2. He's down to a one-hit kill, and now I'm just looking for maybe the fact the ELC or someone was flanking us, but nope, ELC is there. But we're using our gun depression, we're using our traverse arc, ELC is ignoring me, so we go on the attack. Now I'm wondering had I been spotted, and it looks as if I was spotted the whole time. Sixth Sense hasn't gone off in a while, but move into cover from RT. Should have dropped off radar by now. We're advancing, we've got 4 enemy tanks down around this corner, including an IS-3. Now remember, I'm at tier 7. But yet we can deal with an IS-3. We put a shot into his tracks, tracking him in place. That time we did go for the track shot. We're going to put a shot into his badly angled pike nose. And there we go, into the shoulder. This tank can damage higher tier tanks, and once again, you know, just the slightest touch of an enemy or a friendly tank, and I've taken more team damage. So, unfortunately, failed to pen the IS-3 that time. Track him in place just as he gets into cover. I'm gonna leave him. No, I thought I was gonna leave him. He's aiming his gun this way. Oh, now he's not. Can we finish him off? No, because oh, I've forgotten the gun had misbehaved. This is just an extremely good gun, but if you fire before being fully aimed, unfortunately sometimes the gun can troll you, but it does that on most tanks. And that's an RT shot. So this game is over. There's only two tanks left on the enemy team. We've done a very quick 2,382 damage. We played our tank to its strengths, even though we've got no armor, no hit points. We used our speed, we used our gun depression, we used our gun traverse arc, and we've done a lot of damage to higher tier tanks. So once again, because of the acceleration, because of the decent top speed, we can wrap up at the end of games. Another great positive for this tank is just the engine is great, the gun is great. So we're just advancing on this Type 58. I know he's a one-hit kill. We're not driving directly towards him. There he is. And I haven't been spotted. I haven't been spotted. The camo rating on this tank is just so good. So we just flank, move up behind him, auto-aim, and take him out. So there we go. That is kill number 2. We're up to 2,600 damage and just one tank left on the enemy team, enemy RT, and once again wrapping up at the end of games. We're going uphill and we're doing 45 kilometers an hour. Slowing down slightly on the more steeper parts, but you can just see how the mobility and acceleration are a big positive for this tank. The gun is great, but you've got to let it aim in fully, and that's what I'm about to do. So we find RT, and the tank is so small, he has difficulty getting a shot. We aim fully, got nothing to aim at, we finish him off for kill number 3. So the gun handling on this tank is very, very good. Even though I bounced a shot I probably shouldn't, still don't know how that shot bounced, but RNG. And we missed a shot where we weren't fully aimed, but other than that, the gun performed flawlessly in that game. I just love the gun on this tank, even though it gets criticized for its low DPM. The fact it's got such high penetration means that you actually land and pen more shots than maybe similar tier tank destroyers that have better DPM. They have more chance of bouncing. I love the speed and mobility of the tank as well. It means it's great for wrapping up at the end of games. It means it's great for getting into position early, as you saw in that game. And just because you're a forward-facing TD, even though the tank is very, very good when played more passively, it can still be played aggressively. Would I have gone into that position in a Hellcat? Yes, absolutely. Very strong position, especially for tanks with gun depression. And as I say, the best defense for this tank is not to get shot at in the first place. So you could see we earned 1192 XP in that game. It wasn't an ace, but I thought it showed off the engine and the gun very, very well. We did very decent damage against mainly higher tier tanks. We ended up with 3 kills, and you know, we fired 16 and we hit 15. And this is what this gun is all about. We only managed to pen 12 of the 15. I forgot where I missed that third shot in there, but it doesn't really matter. So the damage, it's even though the DPM is not amazing, you can do damage in this tank in a very quick game. That game was only 3.5 or 5.5 minutes long. We were able to do damage as long as your team are good enough, as long as you have time to do some work in this tank. I think the gun handling is great. I think the engine is great. We spotted 1 driving on the front lines or playing on the front lines. We did damaged 8, destroyed 3, and did 444 assistance damage because we were mainly shooting what we were spotting ourselves. And you can see that I didn't fire any premium ammo, so the ammo costs, they're not the cheapest, but they're okay. 16 shots only came to 6,000 credits, which is decent. And the money making seems to be above average for a tier 7 premium, because the fact the penetration on the gun is so good, it means you're going to be doing more damage in this tank. Your shots are going to pen more often in this tank than others. So yeah, I think as a tier 7 money maker, I think it's quite solid. I think it's quite good. Yeah, but that was just the gun and engine. I thought that game showed all those aspects off pretty well. So let's talk about crew, and is the M56 Scorpion a good crew trainer? Well, let's take a look. We've got 4 crew members. We've got a commander, a gunner, a driver, and a loader. As you can see, I've got a crew being trained up in this tank from the Jackson. Does that make it a good crew trainer for most of the tanks on the American TD lines? Well, let's take a look at the low tiers. Well, starting off with tier 2, commander, driver. Okay, we could train up 2 of the crew members there. And at tier 3, we're already running into problems because now we need a radio operator. We can train up 4 of the 5 crew members. Even from tier 3, we've got problems. At T40, exactly the same issue. We need, well, actually a slightly different issue. We need 5 crew members, but there are 2 loaders. We move on to the Wolverine and the T67. And we've got similar issues in that now we don't need the extra loader from tier 4, but we do need an extra radio operator. You should have an extra radio operator lying around from the low tiers anyway. We get to the mid tiers, the Hellcat and the Jackson, exactly the same issue. Radio operators needed for both tanks, unfortunately. So yeah, a little bit of a problem there, but it's not too bad. We're training up most of the crew members. T25-2 has exactly the same issue in that it needs a radio operator. T28 prototype, exactly the same issue, needs a radio operator. And then we get to the higher tiers with the T30. Yep, we need the radio operator, but now we need a second loader for the T30. The T110E4, again, we don't need the radio operator anymore, but we do need a loader. So on one line of American TDs, unfortunately, it's not a perfect match. You're going to need loaders, you're going to need radio operators. However, on the other TD line, which I wasn't really aware of, and I should have been because I've been driving the T25AT, is once you get past the Jackson, the T25AT is a perfect match for crew training. So it matches the T25AT, and it also matches, I'm happy to say, the T28, in that it's a perfect crew trainer for the T28 at tier 8. When we get on to tier 9 on the second line, unfortunately, Oh, I forgot T95. Ah, okay, perfect crew trainer for the T95. But when we get to tier 10, the T110E3, we're going to need an extra loader again. But yeah, I mean, it's a decent crew trainer. It's not the best crew trainer. You're going to need a loader. You're going to need an extra radio operator. But there are some TDs here it's a perfect crew trainer for. But if you've gone through the American TDs, you should have spare radio operators. You should have spare loaders, at least from the lower tiers left over by the time you get to the higher tiers. But not perfect, but it's not terrible. So moving on to equipment. Now, there aren't too many equipment choices available for the M56 Scorpion, but very few of them are viable in my opinion. This is a tank where basically its best defense is its camo and not getting shot at in the first place. So starting off with a toolbox, complete waste of time on this tank. Better pieces of equipment. Toolbox, yes, this tank doesn't like getting shot at. If you get tracked out in the open, you're probably going to die. Toolbox will help you put those tracks back on quicker, but there are better pieces of equipment. As I say, once you start getting shot at, you've got to get out of there as quickly as you can, and I don't think the toolbox is viable because, you know, even in the 25% repair speed time, you're probably going to die. Better pieces of equipment. Filling the tanks with CO2 to improve your fuel tank durability, less chance of going on fire when someone shoots you. Again, a complete waste of time. There are better pieces of equipment. Enhanced gun laying drive to improve your aiming speed. You know, on paper it could be viable, but the aim time on this tank is 1.8 seconds. It's very, very good in the first place, and I think there are much better pieces of equipment than a gun laying drive, but choice is up to you. Coated optics, again, some people might say it's viable. You know, 10% of view range, it's a fast mobile TD, but yes, you don't want to get spotted in this tank. You can play it a little bit more aggressively, you can play it a little bit more actively, and then maybe coated optics would help you, but the tank's biggest strength is its camo value and bush mechanics and basically shooting targets from range where either they don't shoot you or have difficulty getting shots back, and in which case I think coated optics are less viable than binocs. If you're playing the tank to its strengths, then I think binocs are a much better choice. Coated optics will only give you 10% of view range, but binocs, because you're going to be sitting still, using that gun traverse, using that gun depression, you're going to be getting 25% additional view range, and 350 meters of view range definitely benefits more from binocs than it does from coated optics. So binocs are my first viable piece of equipment, or at least one of the ones I use on the tank, but as per always, the choice is up to you. Medium caliber gun rammer, again, you'll notice it's a medium caliber gun rammer because it's essentially a medium tank gun on a tank destroyer, and it's a, you know, I don't find the DPM that bad, but improving your DPM by 10% is an absolute must on most vehicles in the game. So, you know, it gets 2,000, almost 2,200 DPM. Equipment and crew skills can get that DPM up. It's one of the weaker points of the vehicle, so gun rammer is definitely viable on the tank. Wet ammo rack, even though this tank is made out of ammo racks, you know, you can physically see the ammo racks on this tank, and shots from the front can take out crew members and can take out your ammo rack. Shots to this tank will do multiple crew, multiple equipment damage if you get shot at. As I say, the best defense in this tank is not to get shot at in the first place. So yeah, wet ammo rack I think is a complete waste of time. Enhanced torsion bars to improve the suspension durability, complete waste of time, and you're not going to be ramming or doing damage to yourself by ramming enemy tanks. You're going to be trying to avoid getting rammed, so I think it's a waste of time. Camo net, absolute must, another viable piece of equipment because this tank's biggest strength, as I say, it's its camo rating. It's a tiny target, it's got great gun handling, and you want to use its camo rating with a camo net. It just means that sometimes you're invisible and don't get spotted even when you expect to, so very viable piece of equipment. And light spall liner to protect from ramming or explosions. Yeah, it only takes effect when you've got armor, and this tank has absolutely no armor, so tank shooting HE at you, it doesn't matter. Those shots are going to hit, they're going to pen, and as I say, constantly, the best defense on this tank is not to get shot at in the first place. So overall, I've gone for the camo net, the binocs, and the rammer, and I honestly can't think of any better pieces of equipment I'd put on this tank if I want to play it to its strengths. Okay folks, time for the overview game, a game where I show you as many strengths and weaknesses of whatever tank I'm reviewing in one replay, and I had a few potential overview games picked out, but I eventually went for this one, which I will explain during the endgame results. On paper, I am a tier 7 in a tier 9 game, so I'm as bottom tier in this game as you can be, although there are only 2 tier 9s on either side, and I use my speed and acceleration to get into early positions. And there's a Black Prince. And you can see that the accuracy is there. We do our first damage and we get spotted. So now I know that the light tank has to be somewhere in the middle. So we reverse. And the reverse speed of this tank is so much better since it got buffed. It used to be 12 kilometers an hour. Now it is 17. It is so much better for getting out of position. So I know I'm stealth again. People are blind shooting. We aim. And of course the Black Prince stops just as we fire and we end up missing a shot. But if he'd kept moving, that would have been a hit. But as a result of the decent reload time, although it's not amazing, it is good enough. We take out the Black Prince for kill number 1. And now look at the accuracy. This is what this gun is all about. Nothing to shoot at through the gap. We put a shot into the T30. So this is it's just a great gun, regardless of the criticism it receives for its poor DPM. So we're just advancing. There are 2 RT on the enemy team, and if I was RT, I'd be blind firing this bush. I'm kind of a little bit weary about RT firing, so we're going to sit here. I've got binocs equipped. I've let my binocs kick in. The SP1C is asking for help. But if you look at the distribution of our team, now on paper our team was not very strong. And it's obvious, you know, from the way the game began, that things are going to go badly. So Jagdpanther 2 gets spotted, get 1 shot into him. I don't get spotted. And maybe I should have gone for the AMX 1357, but unfortunately I don't. Our SP1C gets taken out from my T54 Mod 1 in town, and now I've got to relocate. So I'm using again the speed, the acceleration. We're doing up to 35 kilometers an hour. We hit the flat ground, and all of a sudden, after running through some wrecks, we're getting up to our top speed, but our team never went into town. Yes, that is a KV-3. That is a KV-3 camping behind RT sniping with a derp gun. And this is one of the problems and one of the reasons I picked out this replay. It's not a strong team. Oh, our KV-3 decided to move on our top tier heavy, the IS-3. I'm going to give this guy the benefit of the doubt. I'm not going to say he's a bot, but he's playing like a bot. He's AFK. And we've set up, we've had to retreat. The shell velocity, actually, I forgot to mention the shell velocity till now. Look at the accuracy. Again, nothing to shoot at, just a small gap between the rock and the rise, but nothing to shoot at. We get a shot into the Tiger 2. Shell velocity is not the quickest. Shell velocity is definitely not the quickest, but that IS-3 basically has now started moving, and yeah, I'd say possibly he was AFK, or it's possible that the tank didn't start moving until the enemy tanks were detected, but we're just going to go to work here. I've had to retreat, I've had to relocate, and I'm dealing damage from distance, and this is what this tank is great at. Unfortunately, I miss a shot there, so we fall back. I know that the Mod 1 has poor view range, so, well, maybe not as poor as I thought. We ended up getting spotted, but look how quickly we're able to reverse back over that rise, get into cover, and we're just adjusting. We're going to be playing our tank to its strengths, using its gun depression, and we get a shot into the IS. Now, what you've got here is, this is what enemy tanks have to see. They've got nothing. Absolutely nothing to shoot me. This is why this tank is so great regarding its camo rating. It's so small profile. Use that gun depression and you can use positions where absolutely nothing is exposed of your tank. But we get a shot into the IS and we're just shooting tanks that are advancing now. Playing the tank to its strengths, but once again, when you don't have a strong team... Oh, enemy. AMX 1357 was a tank I was worried about. We've got to go to work. Miss a shot in the move. This tank actually isn't very good at shooting on the move, but we missed that shot. I'm almost reloaded. We take out the AMX. And now I'm wondering, do I go back into my position or do I relocate? So I know we're safe up to my right because we've got a bunch of guys who decided to go, yep, valley. Yeah, not a strong team. So they've pushed, we're capping, they're capping, and we've just pushed up and we're going to do some work. So once again, using my small profile, using my gun depression, keeping my tank as hidden as possible, and we're just going to start pouring the pain into the tanks that are moving into our cap. So hopefully our team are going to cap out and it's going to be a victory. But the enemy tanks seem to have gone back to defend. We're continuing to work here. We're already on 3k damage. Not much to shoot at. No, nothing on the Tiger. Oh, someone shut down the cover for the T-29. And you can see there's a small little bush in front of me. I'm using the bush, I'm using my gun depression and slow profile to try and, you know, exploit the camo rating of this tank. Trying to do damage. I have to move up to spot the FV. No, come on, get a shot in. And unfortunately the Tiger popped. The IS wasn't able to shoot the Tiger. So it's basically just the IS, RT and myself defending at the moment. Go for a track shot in the Tiger 1, unfortunately missed, but I'm, you know, you can see enemy tanks shooting at my position because my camo rating is so good. I'm already back in stealth mode. We pop up to, oh, there's a Tiger 2 here as well, but bounce on the front of the turret, get back into cover, and again, I love the reverse speed. It makes the tanks so flexible. The only problem is the lack of survivability. So Tiger 1, I put a shot into his track wheel, but unfortunately he used a repair kit just as I do. So, yeah, we're just doing damage. We're playing as well now, but if you look at the minimap, we are now screwed. There's no way we can win, because I am amazed that FV managed to get a shot into me, but this tank has no armor. Even at that extreme angle, it's got a pen, but you can see that the tanks that went and sat in enemy cap all died. And now we've got tanks coming down the 2 line, we've got tanks in front of us. I can't relocate to where RT is. I go for a blind shot in where the T-29 was, but we have to kill these tanks. We have to kill the tanks in front of us. There are 4 tanks in front of us. We have to kill them before the enemy are able to flank us through the valley. And I can't relocate. There we go, Yag Panther 2. I need to go, well, I screwed up there because I needed to drive forward. That would have taken me into the gun of the Tiger, the FV, and the Tiger 2, but there was nothing I could do. I just felt helpless in this game because our team distribution at the beginning was absolutely terrible. There goes our RT. It's just an IS-3 left. We'll speed this up on ×8 maybe. And he gets flanked and gets taken out. So the specific reason I picked this replay, even though I had a couple of others, you can see I've got overview question mark up here, is because of one of the problems with the tank. As I say, I want to show you the strengths and weaknesses of the tank. You got to see fast mobility, you got to see fast acceleration, fast reverse, playing peekaboo, things that this tank is all good at. You got to see the gun handling and how good it is. Very, very few poor shots there, and the only time I missed shots was basically maybe a little bit down to a low shell velocity, or shooting tanks at extreme distance that stopped or moved just as I fired. But other than that, the gun handled very, very well. You can see that, you know, we came second on XP. We did 4k damage, we got 3 kills, and this is important, we did 818 XP. That's base XP with no heroic medals. If we'd gotten a heroic medal here, it would have been a much, much better result. But the tank can make credits, even on a loss. 66,000 credits earned. We fired 27 shots, and the ammo only came to 10,000 credits. So it's a money maker. We fired no premium, didn't have to fire any premium. You can see the repair costs for the tank are quite cheap. It's capable of doing damage even though it gets criticized for its DPM. We damaged 11 tanks on the enemy team, destroyed 3, did 59 base cap points, but yeah, it was a loss, and that's the reason I decided to pick this overview game over another one, because even though the XP with no heroic medals was actually very good, it probably would have been an ace tanker had I been able to pick up a heroic medal. It didn't help that our team was just very, very weak. Incredibly weak. Our IS-3, our top tier heavy, basically sat AFK until enemy tanks were rolling into our spawn. We had heavy tanks that were camping behind Arty and sniping with derp guns. These weren't inexperienced players, I should point out. They just hadn't learned how to play the game. We had tanks that went to town and then didn't go into town. They basically sat in the corner till they died. We had tanks that basically won the valley, then advanced up the valley and sat in the enemy cap till they died. It was an incredibly weak team, and I'm going through a losing spell in World of Tanks at the moment, so this is just another one of those games. But on top of that, the M56 Scorpion, it is very, very team dependent. That's the whole reason I picked this overview game with the question mark. It's because it's team dependent, and no matter how good the tank is regarding its speed and mobility, and no matter how good the tank is regarding its gun handling, unfortunately, quite often when you're playing solo, you're going to be down to the mercy of the matchmaker. I don't mind the matchmaker putting me in tier 9 games because this tank can do a job in tier 9 games. But when your team is not particularly weak, you don't have time to play or you don't have time to work your gun, do damage, your team dies too quickly, takes up the wrong positions, you end up getting within view range of enemy tanks and they can shoot you back, then, yep, this tank has problems because it has absolutely no survivability. Okay folks, time to sum up. If the M56 Scorpion appears in a gift shop near you, is it going to be worth picking up? Well, let's start with the positives, because this tank has a lot of positives. Starting with the gun, because the gun is pretty much all positives. It's got absolutely amazing penetration. You can see this from the 90mm. It's got amazing penetration, especially for a tier 7. You've got more penetration than most tier 8s do. You've got 219mm of penetration. You've got 275mm of penetration with the premium ammo. This is a tank, a tier 7, that even though, it can see tier 9s, it can still deal with tier 9s even with its standard ammo. You don't need to fire that much premium ammo when you're in this tank because the penetration on the gun is that good, along with amazing aim time. The aim time is very good, and the accuracy is also a huge positive, so you can hit weak spots even on heavily armored higher tier targets. So the penetration on the gun is great, the aim time is great, the accuracy is great. It gets 10 degrees of gun depression, which is very good. In addition to that, it also has an amazing gun arc of almost 30 degrees, which means that you don't have to move your hull when you're tracking targets, so that adds to its camo value. So it's the gun, it's got a lot of positives. Very good gun, enjoy using it. Now, the next positive I've already mentioned, which is the concealment. The camo values of this tank are very good, and the fact you don't have to move your hull to hit targets, the fact it's a tiny target in the first place, just adds to its camo values. And if you've got a camo net and a camo crew, as you can see I've got a camo crew on the tank, the camo values are just absolutely amazing for this tank, especially when you consider this is a TD that came out after the TD camo nerfs of not so long ago. So another big positive for the tank. The mobility, other positives. Even though it's not the fastest TD on paper, the fact that it's very light, and even though it gets the worst engine of any of the tier 7 premium TDs, it's got the best horsepower to weight ratio, so it can accelerate up to 45 kilometers an hour, which is very good, very easily. It's got great acceleration, it's got a decent top speed, it will allow you to get into position, it will allow you to get out of position very quickly, and in addition to that, it's got great traverse, so the tank is very maneuverable. It's also got a 17 kilometer an hour reverse speed, which means that you can use the tank for peekaboo tactics. You can set up around a corner, use the gun traverse arc, pop out, take a shot, reverse back into cover very quickly. So these are all positives. I think the gun handling and the tank handling are very good, along with the fact it's a tiny target to begin with. It's got great camo rating, all positives. But I don't want to sound too enthusiastic here because the tank has a lot of problems. It's got a lot of negatives as well. The alpha damage, while the gun is great, the gun handling is great, everything connected to the gun is great, unfortunately the alpha damage I think is okay. I think the alpha damage is okay, but compared to most other TDs around the same tier, it's not amazing. And as a result, the DPM is not amazing. I don't think the rate of fire or the reload is bad, but the DPM overall is very poor on this tank when you compare it to other tier 7 TDs. But you've got to take the accuracy and penetration. You're more likely to pen targets in this tank so that the DPM counts than you are in other tier 7 TDs. So the DPM definitely on the poor side, but I don't think it's going to kill the tank, but it's definitely a negative. It's not an amazing crew trainer, okay? So, it's got 4 crew members. It's going to train up most American TD crews. It's okay if you're going down one line of TDs, in that if you get to the, the T95, then yes, you're going to train up a few tanks that are perfect match, but in the most part, you're going to need extra loaders, you're going to need extra radio operators, so it's not a perfect crew trainer. It's got a very, although I love the gun handling. The gun traverse arc is amazing, a positive. Unfortunately, the gun traverse speed is very poor, which means that if a target is driving across the front of your tank, you might actually have difficulty trying to track him with your gun traverse speed. So while it's both a positive and a negative, I think definitely the gun traverse speed is a negative overall. And then we come to the armor, which is probably one of the biggest negatives, obviously, for the tank, because look at the survivability rating. It's got a survivability rating of 2 because it has absolutely no hull armor. This tank gets wrecked, absolutely wrecked by most tanks that shoot at it, and on top of that, the hit points for a tank that has absolutely no armor. I mean, in wargaming, what they do with a lot of tanks that have poor armor is they give it a hit point boost. You know, it gets better hit points than similar tanks, but this has got the worst armor and the worst hit points of any of the tier 7 premium tanks, so you really do not want to get shot when you're in this tank. It hurts a lot because everything is so tightly packed. You've got your ammo rack, you've got your gun, you've got your crew. Anything that shoots this tank is going to do multiple equipment, multiple crew damage. HE is going to one-hit kill this tank, or at least take off most of your health and do a heck of a lot of module and crew damage at the same time. The tank has absolutely no survivability, and in addition to the fact it's got absolutely no survivability, it's at the mercy of the matchmaker. This tank, it needs time to work. It needs time to shoot enemies. It needs time, or it needs a decent team that will spot enemies so that you could shoot them from distance. It needs a team that will live long enough in order for you to do damage to the enemy. And unfortunately, you know, at least the way my matchmaker's been going recently, I'm not getting very many teams like that. So unfortunately, I think the tank is very susceptible to the matchmaker. Not in the fact it doesn't get special matchmaking, which is technically a negative, because this tank can handle tier 9s. This tank has the penetration, it has the accuracy to hurt tier 9s. Even without premium ammunition, you can hurt tier 9s with this gun. Unfortunately, you need to be able to live long enough to do that. So that has to be a negative. You know, it's very team dependent. I would probably recommend trying to play the Scorpion when you're in a platoon and you're then not as reliant on your team to give you time to be able to do damage in this tank. And the final negative for this tank, and to be honest, the one that annoys me most, is just how susceptible this tank is to ram damage, because you weigh absolutely nothing. You've got no armor. So, you know, enemy tanks, if they decide they're going to ram you to death, they're going to ram you to death. There's absolutely nothing you can do about it. You're going to take a lot of damage from ramming, and not only from enemy tanks, but also friendlies. You know, when you're trying to leave the cap circle at the beginning of the game, people are driving into each other, and that's not that an issue. You know, that's not that big an issue in most tanks, but it's a huge issue in this tank. You can lose a lot of health simply from careless driving by friendly teammates who, you know, might be used to rubbing up against another tank in order to work a corner, but the fact that you're in a tank that takes ram damage from absolutely nothing, you know, you're going to take a lot of damage from friendlies, and it can get very annoying sometimes. So that is my personal pet peeve about the tank, but there's nothing, absolutely nothing you could do about it. The tank is just too light and has absolutely no armor. But is it worth picking up? I mean, it's got a lot of positives, it's also got a lot of negatives. Is it worth spending money on? And I will have to say, overall, I enjoy the Scorpion. When my teams are not bad, I really enjoy the Scorpion. I love the fact you've got 10 degrees of gun depression. I love the fact you've got a decent reverse speed so that you can play peekaboo. And the reason I love the reverse speed, and I keep on mentioning the reverse speed, is because I think if you're unsure about whether or not you're going to buy a Scorpion, my best advice is to get a Hellcat. Yes, the tier 6 American TD, even though it's a whole tier lower. That is a tank destroyer that has a turret, admittedly, but, you know, it can use its turret much like the gun traverse arc on this tank. It's fast, it's maneuverable, and has absolutely no armor. So if you get into position and can play the Hellcat well, I think this is probably a tank destroyer that plays most like the Hellcat. You've got the acceleration, you've got the speed, you've got the maneuverability that maybe the Hellcat doesn't have, but you've got to deal with the slow traverse speed of the gun arc on this, and you've got to deal with the slow traverse arc of the turret on the Hellcat. And the Hellcat's gun is very, very good for its tier, and this gun is extremely good for its tier. Both tanks have very poor survivability, and they're both American tanks, so if you can play the Hellcat well and you enjoy playing the Hellcat, then there's a probably a very good chance you're going to enjoy playing the Scorpion. They've both got good gun depression, they've both got good guns, and they've got no armor. So I think of all the advice I can give regarding the Scorpion, it's play the Hellcat. I think if you enjoy the Hellcat, you're going to enjoy this tank, but in some ways this tank is even better than the Hellcat in that its reverse speed actually got buffed, whereas the Hellcat's reverse speed got nerfed not so long ago. So this tank can play peekaboo as well as the Hellcat did prior to its nerf. The Hellcat isn't quite as good at playing peekaboo these days, but this tank is. You can use its gun traverse, poke out a corner, take a shot, and reverse into cover very, very quickly. You can use its gun depression, poke over the top of a hill, take a shot, reverse back down very, very quickly. And it reminds me a lot of the Hellcat. So that's my best advice, guys. If you are not sure about the Scorpion, play the Hellcat, and if you can play it well, you're probably going to do well in the Scorpion. Overall, I think the tank is very, very solid. Unfortunately, because it's not on the tech tree, you can't buy it for gold on the tech tree. It's unknown whether or not it's in a package. It's unknown what special offer Wargaming give it in, so I can't really say it's worth it as regards the price in euros or dollars or whatever currency you use, but I think it's a very, very solid tier 7 tank. It's a tier 7 that doesn't get special matchmaking, but it doesn't need special matchmaking because it has a gun that can damage tier 9s. It's got great penetration, and yes, the alpha damage may not be amazing, and you do absolutely need a team that allows you to play this tank to its strengths, but overall I find my play sessions in the Scorpion fun, and I find the tank very, very competitive, even though it's a premium tank and even though it's a tier 7. Traditionally tier 7s are terrible, but it's competitive. I enjoy it, and I don't even mind when I get it into tier 9 games because I know I can damage tier 9s. I know that I can get more XP and credits from hitting tier 9s, and this is a gun that's good enough to do it. So overall, I think the Scorpion is a pretty good tank, guys. It's worth it, depending on the type of package Wargaming sell it in. But that's it for now. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.